Let's probably start with our Western partners, because the United States is in an active phase of the election. We are following this election, and the gap between Harris and Trump has narrowed in some states. In your opinion, what is the reason for this? And are the candidates really leveling up again in key states? The real situation is that despite the positive dynamics of Jackie Lagares in recent times, Donald Trump has started to catch up with her. It started around the time of the vice presidential debate. Although at first glance, it seemed that this should not change the electoral situation. Because the debate was even, this equality in the debate convinced part of the electorate that Trump's policies could be adequate. After all, J.D. Vance was a big hit with many people, and he was expected to make some controversial, radical statements. But nevertheless, he proved to be very professional and restrained at the debate, mostly expressing adequate centrist positions. Trump himself has somewhat softened his rhetoric, moved away from the thesis that migrants eat dogs, and started talking more about the economy, which is important for Americans. When the question is put in the context of whose vision of the U.S. economy is closest to your own, Trump wins over Kamala Harris by a wide margin. After all, her economic views are considered too left-wing, even Marxist to some extent. This is due to her father, a Marxist economist, and in principle, to many of the points she makes. In addition, the scandal with Rapperpedia played against her because there are Russian bot farms involved. And it is obvious that Trump's team is fueling various rumors about the connection and participation in these parties. Part of the electorate, looking at this, cannot doubt Trump. Yes, there are plenty of scandals, but the fact is that this is Trump, and his controversy is already part of his image. Kamala Harris does not have the kind of things that could attract the electorate. This can be disturbing for some of those who are undecided. Plus, the active involvement of Elon Musk. He is already fully in the process. We should not forget that, in addition to being a billionaire, one of the richest people in the world, he is also one of the most influential influencers in the world. This is a man with a huge audience and a huge influence on it. He is no longer just hinting or talking about something on Twitter. He is participating in election rallies and actively supporting Donald Trump. Plus, the situation with the hurricane can play to his advantage to some extent, because it's easy to say now that the government has not prepared, the government has not done anything necessary. Kamala Harris is part of this current government. She is Joe Biden's vice president, and by attacking the government, he can harm it. Thus, taking into account all these indicators, Trump has begun to catch up somewhere, to level up. And make the election situation even more unpredictable. Donald Trump's arrival in the White House could be a real shock to the world. This is what Western experts say. Do you think this is true? And what dangers should we expect? We're talking about Nato, about this rhetoric of resolving the Ukrainian crisis and the Russian-Ukrainian war, how he talks about a fairly short time frame. What is this danger? If we start talking about all the dangers of Trump's presidency now, theorizing, it will take up a lot of airtime. But in general, we can say something. First of all, Manafort, Viktor Yanukovych's political strategist, and in principle, a fairly close friend of Donald Trump, is working with him now. He has some influence on his election campaign, and perhaps on his ideas about politics, including Ukraine. In other words, Yanukovych's political strategist is now one of Donald Trump's advisors. This is, I think you will agree, an interesting story. So it's extremely difficult to actually predict what it might be. Many people say that this is a kind of Donald Trump's arm. I don't see anything good in that, because in times of such great upheaval, a certain predictability is a great luxury. Trump's rhetoric and past communications with Putin suggest he respects him as an equal and possibly a role model. He has openly expressed authoritarian ambitions, stating he dreams of becoming a dictator, and has implied this could be his last election. What is his real attitude towards Ukraine? Ukraine was the reason for the impeachment procedure against him. We don't know what his real attitude towards Zelenskyy is. Therefore, there are a lot of risks, not only in relation to Ukraine, but also in relation to the Middle East and Taiwan. Donald Trump is like that ball from American movies, especially from the 80s and 90s. When you don't know the answer to a question, you ask that ball, and some random answer comes out. Trump is roughly the personification of that ball. Let's talk about Joe Biden next. He spoke quite sharply against Obama, noting that Obama did not take Putin seriously in 2014. And in due time, the United States did not do enough. This suggests that Biden himself is now ready or preparing to take some radical steps towards Ukraine.
Зараз готовий або готується до якихось радикальних кроків в бік України і, що
What can Biden really do now before the end of his term? Biden, if my memory serves me correctly, was Barack Obama's vice president at the time. It's a pity that he didn't make an impact at the time and explain to Obama that this threat should be taken seriously. But the situation is indeed like this, and when the debates between the candidates took place, Obama was on the Democratic side and Mitt Romney was on the Republican side. Romney was saying that Russia is a big threat, that we need to take it seriously. The Republicans generally had a super pro-Ukrainian position that we need to support Ukraine, that we need to help Ukraine. And Obama was telling him that he was living under some kind of Cold War illusions, that Russia was not our enemy, Russia was our partner, and everything would be fine. There would be fine. There would be no conflicts. And we can see where this has led in the end. Indeed, there are some positive expectations, and in particular, they were associated with the upcoming summit, or rather, with the Ramstein meeting, where a meeting at the level of heads of state was to take place. But, as we know, due to circumstances that we cannot influence, and even the President of the United States cannot influence, this situation is postponed for a certain period of time, and the announcement of these decisions is delayed. However, now more than ever, we can expect some decisive steps from Joe Biden. Obviously, he doesn't want his term to be remembered for indecision and the escalation of all possible conflicts. He will want to make some serious, strong-willed decision at the end of his term. He's had a long and powerful career, and he's not going to want to end it in such a crumpled way. You say that Biden won't want to end his cadence like this. One of the decisions we expect is long range. This is something that the White House can make now.
Не захоче Байден закінчити так свою каденцію. Одне з рішень, яке ми очікуємо, це далекобійність. І це те, що зараз, ну, направду, от Білий дім може нам політичне рішення, це
Defense Express writes that the United States has decided to promote another formal reason why there is no authorization for long-range missiles. And the point is that once again, the United States is finding an excuse not to supply Ukraine with long-range weapons because our armed forces will not be able to use cruise missiles effectively. Is this an excuse or is the decision postponed for some time? As for the long-range capability, there are still several options for the decision that we may hear in the near future.
Крилаті ракети JASM. Ну, от відмовка чи все ж таки рішення відкладене на певний час?
I think this is a question of a fairly short-term perspective. I think that the decision has most likely already been made behind the scenes, and the only question is whether it will be announced publicly when the time is right.
Достатньо близької перспективи. І я гадаю, що рішення це швидше за все кулуарно вже ухвалено, питання тільки озвучення його публічно.
The political leadership of the United States is now listening very closely to the results of opinion polls, and they are not making decisions that could negatively affect the trends in vector support. If these measurements show that there is no clear-cut attitude among the electorate of the United States of America to whether or not to grant this permit, they will not publicly submit and approve it. We would like to hear a public announcement so that it would be a powerful signal to the Russian Federation that the West is serious and supporting Ukraine. Nevertheless, we will get a decision. Perhaps it will be announced after the election, including by Joe Biden. No matter how the election ends, we remember that he remains the President of the United States of America until January. He will have every opportunity to make such a decision, even though Donald Trump may not like it, even if he wins. Zelenskyy was going to present his victory plan at Ramstein on October 12th, which is deferred to our partners. Ramstein will take place. It has just been postponed. Volodymyr Zelenskyy said this today in Croatia, but the Ukrainian leader will come to Berlin and present his victory plan to Olaf Scholz. This was reported by Bild.
Видання Білд. Чому саме Шольцу, чому зрештою не дочекаються цього Рамштайну і ось ця
Why is this meeting, which was planned with the participation of Scholz, Macron, Starman and Zelenskyy, without Biden, will it be held in a quadripartite format? I think this format will also be used to fill the vacuum of anticipation before Ramstein. After all, the media activities were planned precisely for the fact that Ramstein will take place right now. Perhaps we should start with the one who is most in doubt, and that is, of course, Olaf Scholz. Especially in the context in which we are now, he is one of our most uncertain partners. You can understand him. He is not a leader-type politician. He is not a person who is capable of dealing with the kind of crisis challenges that we have. He is a party functionary, and he would have to decide, I don't know, what color the road markings should be, what size the social security system should be. And now he is facing a migration crisis, an energy crisis, and Ukraine's war with the Russian Federation, which is exacerbating this problem. Plus, his right-wing radicals are making huge gains in the political arena in Germany. He's confused somewhere, and he wants to take at least some of the responsibility off himself. For him, if any problem is resolved by itself, it will only be a plus. Perhaps he sees an opportunity in a compromise end to the war in Ukraine as a salvation for himself, as he plans to keep his seat. Perhaps Volodymyr Zelenskyy will try to convey this to him at this meeting. That the plan we have, if Germany supports him, will be a magic wand that will save him from the situation he is in. Olaf Scholz is ready for talks with Putin on ways to end the war in Ukraine, as reported by Reuters the day before. The fact that Western military experts are now sounding the alarm and talking about insufficient financial and military support for Ukraine may create a good situation for Putin in which he can build up his reserves.
Хорошу ситуацію, в якій він може нарощувати свої резерви і зрештою піти.
As a result, he could start a more serious war against NATO countries. I mean a full-scale war against NATO countries. And at the same time, Scholz, Germany, which is the second country to support Ukraine, is going to negotiate with Putin.
Підтримкою України збирається іти на якісь там перемовини з Путіним. Сполучені Штати також зараз ситуація не визначена, чи отримаємо ми пакет підтримки на наступний рік.
The United States is also in an uncertain situation. Will we get a support package for the next year? What is the situation for Ukraine in terms of support for the next year? We know for sure that the $8 billion in aid will be in the form of in-kind military aid.
Точно можна сказати, і знову ж таки, той пакет допомоги, не пакет, це загальна допомога, яка була прийнята цього року, вона ще до кінця не використана протягом 25-го.
This is something that can be said for sure. Again, the aid package that was adopted this year has not yet been fully utilized. The programs are designed to last until 2025. In addition, a decision was made to provide Ukraine with a $50 billion loan secured by Russian frozen assets. This decision is likely to be made in the near future. Certain safety nets have been put in place. It is also worth remembering that a number of decisions on the transfer of certain weapons and funds have been announced, but Ukraine will receive them either at the end of 2024 or in 2025. Moreover, the support itself is not decreasing. Of course, if the United States does not vote in 2020 to continue its support, this will be a huge problem. But, as we can see from the example of Israel, once the United States has stepped in and is helping, it does not withdraw completely. Perhaps they are not increasing their support to the level that they should be, but they are continuing it at the minimum level necessary, no matter what the circumstances are. Peter Sciarto says that Ukraine and NATO is the beginning of World War III. Sweden has said that despite the war in Ukraine, Russia could go to war with Sweden to control the Baltic Sea. That is, NATO is still under threat, is that right? I tend to believe that we are already in the period of the Third World War.
Періоді Третьої світової війни, просто зараз вона знаходиться в гібридній фазі, і тут є ще певний люфт можливостей, чи піде вона на спад, чи пройде вона в...
It's just that it's in a hybrid phase right now, and there's still some backlash of possibilities, whether it will go down or move into a hotter phase. As the conflict in the Middle East, which is just beginning to intensify, and some tensions in the Pacific region show, everything is developing in such a way that this conflict is likely to scale. This is scaling up, largely due to the indecisiveness of the United States, which is not giving a sufficient response. Instead of intercepting the aggression at its very beginning, they are trying to manage the escalation as much as possible. As they see it, controlled escalation is their everything. This is where Jake Sullivan, unfortunately, has an absolute influence. For example, Iran is now actively working on its nuclear program, attacking Israel with hundreds of missiles. Iran funds terrorist organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah. The United States must address this problem before it becomes a global one. When Iran definitely has nuclear weapons capable of reaching the United States, it will become a problem that is almost impossible to solve. Now the United States can destroy all nuclear facilities located in Iran. They can do anything to interrupt this problem and prevent Iran from getting closer to Russia and China. At least to resolve the situation in the Middle East. It is clear that they cannot do this with the Russian Federation because it is a nuclear power, and they have roughly parity, at least in terms of the number of nuclear warheads. But the problem with Iran can be solved. The indecision of the United States of America, in my opinion, will be the reason why this war will go into a hot phase. It will be started by Russia in a clash with Sweden or Finland, or by China with an attack on Taiwan. What you are saying creates a sense that the United States has the illusion of control, the illusion of controlling escalation, not real control of escalation. This applies in particular to the policy of deterrence that they are pursuing. Today in Croatia, Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Ukraine's accession to Nato is part of the victory plan that he presented to Joe Biden and is going to present to our partners. Europe is also actively talking about supporting Ukraine and its accession to the alliance. However, there are conditions. They say that Ukraine can join the North Atlantic Alliance, but it is not yet clear what to do with the occupied territories. There are completely different options on how to solve this. In your opinion, can the alliance really become the moment when Ukraine is being persuaded to negotiate with Putin and to make some compromises, so to speak? We use this technique on Napoleon's field. By demanding the impossible, you will get the maximum. And perhaps this is the maximum we can get at the moment. If we talk about this format of security guarantees, the free part of Ukraine's territory is part of the alliance, and the territories temporarily occupied by Russia are not recognized by our allies, NATO countries, as Russian territories. Regardless of the internationally recognized Ukrainian borders, Ukraine assumes the obligation to return them, not by military means. Somewhere, we are being referred to the German scenario, which eventually worked out there, so we can allegedly do the same. This option is indeed being actively discussed now, including because Ukraine has shown resilience under pressure. Ukraine has repeatedly called for negotiations, trying to soften our position, because we are tired of the war and the war is expensive, but Ukraine has not succumbed to such pressure. Ukraine also launched an operation in the Kursk region, demonstrating that we are ready to go on the offensive. Somewhere we copied the Israeli model of behavior, which works. The United States of America says, don't start a ground operation in Gaza, and they do. They say, let's agree on something, but Israel goes ahead anyway. And then the United States says, don't start a ground operation in Lebanon, and go in, bringing the situation to this stage of escalation. Israel doesn't listen, and does it anyway, and the United States continues to support them, because they can't just get out of this situation. Thus, Ukraine has begun to act, to bargain for the most acceptable conditions for us, from our partners. Perhaps these formats, which are being discussed regarding security guarantees from NATO, with Ukraine as a country of origin, are now being discussed in a hybrid format at this stage. But perhaps in the near future, there will be some further evolution, improvement of conditions and proposals for Ukraine. I would like to talk about the summit on the Ukrainian peace formula. It is tentatively scheduled to take place by the end of this year, but the exact dates have not been announced yet. Of course, Ukraine intends to invite Russia to this summit. Zakharova said that Russia would not come. There was no official invitation for Russia yet, but Zakharova has already answered. In your opinion, how likely is it that Russia will be present at this second summit on the Ukrainian peace formula? Why is this important for us? Why is Russia's presence here important? And now it has been postponed indefinitely, although Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the summit should take place in November. What is the reason? The peace summit, in the format in which it was held, correlates with the plan for Ukraine's victory. It seems to me that now there is more of a focus on the implementation of the victory plan. We will see how much we can squeeze out of him, and only then can we talk about a peace summit. For me, it was unclear how the second stage before the peace summit could take place before the presidential elections in the United States. This is still a long story, and if any decisions are to be made, they should be made, among other things, by a representative of the United States government who will implement this program in the future. Many countries are in a waiting phase to see who will become president of the United States, as this will significantly impact U.S. policy and foreign relations. Until the U.S. elections conclude, which may not even occur in 2024, their decisions will remain uncertain. It is quite possible that the second peace summit, if it takes place, will be held in 2025. Or perhaps the implementation of the victory plan will begin in full swing. And then the peace summit as a format will probably outlive its usefulness.